Whenever developers work with complex logic that's spread across multiple stored procedures, UDFs and UTDFs, and executed over time, managing the flow through traditional logging approach becomes challenging and sometimes a nightmare. If you have ever had to debug a series of stored procedures and other user-defined functions as a part of complex data pipeline, especially those ones applying heavy business transformation, you know how valuable well-connected debug information can be. It simplifies troubleshooting and make your life much easier. We have already covered logging using event tables, which is one of Snowflake's powerful new observability feature. This tutorial is an extension of our previous tutorial, but it is still a standalone topic that focuses entirely on trace event in Snowflake. In this quick tutorial, we will explore how event table captures trace information for both user-defined functions as well as stored procedures. You will learn how, as a Snowflake data engineer, you can leverage these features to build better data solutions that are easier to trace and monitor when dealing with specific issues in your Snowflake runtime environment. This is a hands-on tutorial, just like all my other videos. By the end of this video, you will be able to answer many trace event-based questions. A few of them are listed here, and many more will be covered throughout this guide. So stay tuned until the end to learn everything you need to know about trace event in Snowflake. If you want to follow along with the hands-on exercise, make sure to meet these requirements. You need the necessary privileges to enable trace events, sufficient credits in your Snowflake account, and a basic familiarity with Python UDF and stored procedures. Welcome to my channel, Data Engineering Simplified, the only YouTube channel offering practical Snowflake video tutorials for both beginners and expert data professionals. If you are curious where you can find source code and the data files that are used in this tutorial, please find the link below in the description section. And before we proceed, a quick note. All the hands-on exercise are done using Snowflake's free trial Enterprise Edition hosted on AWS. I suggest watch this video in 4K resolution. And if you are a fast learner considering speeding up the video to 1.25x or 1.5x, you can also change the language and listen the tutorial in your preferred language like German or Hindi. If you are looking to learn in a more structured way with complete source code and data files, be sure to check out my courses on Udemy, and some of them are also available through Udemy Business. All of my courses have a rating of 4.7 or higher. For queries, suggestions, or feedback, drop a direct message to my Instagram account. The link is given below. And yes, if you would like to stay updated on Snowflake new and popular features, end-to-end data engineering projects, architectural concept, live demo videos, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, Data Engineering Simplified. So, let's start this tutorial. So, I am back to my Snowsite web UI. This is my event table work folder where I have all the worksheets are available, which I am going to refer throughout this tutorial. So shrinking this, and I am going to use system admin role, which is already selected, and elementary virtual warehouse, which is already part of my context. I am going to create a database called DemoDB, and I will use the default public schema. So let me run this SQL statements. So it got executed, and let me see. So I have this DemoDB and I have this public schema. Good. Now I'm going to create an event table called operations.telemetry.trace events. I already have an operations database and telemetry schema, which I have created in our previous tutorial. So let me switch my role. And here, when I refresh this, I already have operations database and telemetry schema, so I'm not going to create it. I will create trace events table, which is of type event table, using this account admin role. It got created. Now, if I just run this show parameters like event table, let's see what is the current event table registered. So this is a default event table, which is part of my Snowflake database telemetry schema and events as event table. So I'm using this account admin role again, which is already set here. I'm making trace events as my event table. So this is done. I will change my role back to system admin. And let's see if with this role I would be able to fetch this parameter or not. Yes, you can do that. So now this is the key, which is my account level event table key. And this is my operations database elementary schema. And the name of my event table is trace events. Okay. This is a default value which I have overwritten with this new value. And this is an account level parameter. So you must have access to account admin role. Otherwise, you won't be able to set this parameter. Now, this is my simple function, which is called v1 my function. And if you look into its packages, it is importing a Snowflake elementary Python package. And the version which I'm using is 3.9. The name of the handler is basic function. And here, this is my basic function. And what it does, it primarily captures logging information saying nothing. And we will see how the logging as well as the traceable works here with this very simple example. So my role is system admin. I'm using elementary virtual warehouse because creating Python UDF function needs a virtual warehouse. And this is my database and public schema. So my v1 my function successfully created. Now I have to make sure that log level is set before I call the function. So I am running these three statements together. So my log level equals to trace is set for this function specifically. Now let's call this function. It does nothing as we understood. So looks good. I will go here and click on this trace and logs, and I have to wait for a while before this log is printed on my screen. So this is my log and traces. We have already seen the logs in our previous video, and now this is the traces which we are going to understand. And my event table is already operations, telemetry, and trace events. Okay, let me narrow down to single day. Obviously, I have not enabled the traces, so I will not find any information here. Let me click on logs and see if I have any log available. Yes, I have this log functioning which says that I am doing nothing. And when I click on that, it says that this is my basic function, which is a scope, and all those information is available, which we already understood in our previous video. Now, let me click on the traces, and I don't have anything here. So let's go back to our worksheet. Now, since we have imported Snowflake elementary Python and we are not doing anything here, okay, if I have to enable the trace for this scalar function, I have to run this SQL statement which says alter function, name of the function, set trace level equals to always. By default, it is off, or I can also set it on event. Right now, I am starting with always. And if you look into the syntax, it is very similar. Only the parameter which is changing is trace level instead of log level. So there are two different parameters for the function, likewise for stored procedures. And if you have to enable the log or if you have to enable the trace, you need to set this parameter. So let me select this 3 SQL statement and run it at one go. So it is done. Now I am calling this function once again. Now the function is called and I got the result. Now let me refresh this couple of times. So if you see, I have got one trace event here. And if I click on the log, I should have two entries. The second time I called, so my log is still enabled. When I enabled my traces, this is how it looks like. Let me click on that. So this is how this screen comes up. So if you look into the top, it says my trace detail and having a trace ID. Okay. And at the time of recording, this is in the preview version. And within this trace, I have an span. And this is the name of the function which is being called. And this is the total duration for the function execution. If I click on this v1 function, it shows all the detail where it has processed one input row, one output row, and total memory usage is this. Looks good. So this is my span information. This is the record which is being processed. This is the other attribute, and these are the attribute. This is my trace ID, which is matching with this ID. Now I can have multiple span under one trace ID, and for each span, this value will be unique. I can have a custom span, which we will see as a later part of this video. If you have not created anything within your code, this will be global. This is a total duration, which will also be shown here as a timeline. So name is basic function. We have not set any status code like success or a failure. So it is coming as a default. Since it is a scalar function, the number of record it has processed is just one, output is just one. I think If you write it for UDTF, maybe the number of rows will be more than one. And since it is a Python function, it has used a Python runtime environment, and this is the maximum usage of the memory. These are additional telemetry attribute. The name of the function is this. This is a function type, and the super admin is a user. This use telemetry virtual warehouse, DemoDB, and so on. Now, if I click onto the events, so there is no record because I have not added any event. This is the related metrics for your Python runtime environment. I will cover this part in my future video. And if you click on the log, we added one log as a part of this event. This log has appeared here. So you see, I have not done any event relay from this Python. However, a lot of information has been captured just because I added this Snowflake telemetry Python package, and I have enabled this trace level. And with that, I managed to get a lot of detail. Okay. Now let's say I have made a mistake in this Python code and I am trying to execute. Let me create this once again. So this got created. Since I recreated my Python function, I want to make sure that the trace level is set back to always. So this is done. And now I am calling this select v1. It clearly says that this has failed because response object is not defined. When if any failure has happened as a part of this demo underscore db2. So I selected my filter criteria and automatically this failure has appeared here. So when I click on this, this says that this took 2 milliseconds. And when I click on it, this got changed automatically from our previous status where it was unset. If I need to know what had happened, then I can click on the logs. Here I do not have any information. So when I click on this span event, it clearly says that this response is not defined as a part of this UDF function on line number 9. So this way you would be able to understand everything under a single trace and you don't need to go and check each of the different logs. Let me make one change here. Let me say on event and let me run this. I executed this and let change back to 1 and let me recreate this. Now I have already made the trace level change to on event. And as you know that this code is not adding any event, which we'll understand in the later part of this video. So I change from always to on event as a value for my trace level. Now let me call this function and let's see what happens. So I got the expected result, looks good. Now I am changing it to 2 and recreating this because it may take a while to. So I created that and I change it back to always. And then I am calling this function once again. I executed this function twice, one with on event and one with always. And let's see what is the behavior. So if the trace level is on event versus always, and if I do not have any event associated with my Python function, let's see what happens. So I will continue to refresh for some time. So if I look into this result and click on this span, since I am not putting this value, it is hard to know what is the result it is getting. Okay. But alternatively, what can I do? I can go to my query history. And if you look, I have this function where result was 2. So Snowflake also added this query telemetry. And when I click on it, I can have this detail. And here all this thing is available. If I say span event, no record found, related metric, no record found, and logs, no record found. Okay, looks good because after recreating the stored procedure, I did not run the log level equals to trace. That's why the logs are missing. If I go to this function where it returned 1, my telemetry will be empty. When I call the function, my trace level was equals to on event and not always. So this is what the purpose of always, off, and on event. If you set the values to always, a lot of trace events will be captured in your event table. So from monitoring traces and log, I can go to the traces and log and I can see all the detail, and this will come in a more structured fashion. Alternatively, I can run select star from operations telemetry trace event, which is the event table. And if I run this query, let's see what result does it bring. So it says you're not authorized because I have to change my role to account admin. So let's start with record type, where whether it is span event, log, span, log, and log. Right now, more focus on traces. So whenever you are enabling the trace level, your record type will be either span or span event. Okay. And let's see in which case it will be a span event versus span. So whenever you have an exception, obviously that will be considered as an span event. And for all other cases, it will consider as a span. One important thing, this is a start time when your trace event is started, and this is the end time when your trace event ends. Okay. Only for a logging, you will have the observed timestamp, but for your trace event, you will not have the observed timestamp. Okay. Now here I will have a trace ID followed by span ID. And if I click on this, let's see, I will copy this and go to my JSON visualizer. So this is the demo DP. This is the executable ID, a very interesting one. And then this is a function which I invoked. This is the query as a part of which it ran. This is the session ID and primary role and role name and other information, right? This is the Python code. And by combining the Snowflake's usage schema and this telemetry information, you can really create a nice observability dashboard if you really want to have it something more extensive on the top of Snowflake's provided trace and log dashboards. Now, when we click on this record type, let's see what information does it capture. So it says span kind internal basic information, status code error. Okay, in this case, it is just an exception. This is also unset because in this time it is error and in this time it is unset. And this is also unset because you can set it to success or a failure based on your requirement. Now, if I click on this, this is the information which was shown on the side panel. So whatever is visible here can be extracted from the event table, and you can really create your own dashboard if it is required through the Snow side or through the Streamlit. So we have seen a very simple function which is doing nothing but just importing this Snowflake telemetry library. Now we are going to go through a slightly complex function, and we will see how this information appears when we try to go with a slightly more complex example. So let's understand what this v1 underscore calculate taxable income function is doing. I will not go in detail. So it is a slightly complex example than the previous one. It takes a employee's total salary, the tax rebate code, and exemption amount, a very hypothetical scenario. Here I am importing telemetry Python library, and on the line number 62, it says from Snowflake import telemetry. And this is the handler, which is also specified here. So here it is a map between employee salary and the tax code and this exemption amount. And for different tax code, this is the rebate percentage. So by default, the percentage is 30%. And if you fall under any one of this rebate code, it will be 10, 15, or a 20% respectively. Here it checks the percentage of your exemption. If it is less than 30%, then it applies. Otherwise, it doesn't. And here, if you see, this is actually having a standard deduction. And finally, if the taxable income is greater than 0, it returns this taxable income. In this code, this is the only line which is part of the telemetry library. I'm not doing anything. So let me run this. So this is my system admin role and telemetry virtual warehouse. So let me create this under my demo DB. So it got created successfully. Now, before I call this function, I am changing the trace level equal to always, and I am changing the log level equals to trace. So this got executed. So now it is enabled, and let me call it. So I got the result, and again, we don't need to worry about this calculation. Coming back to this screen from v1 my function, now I will continue to refresh for a while. So let me choose the last date and let me select my demo underscore db2, and I will continue to refresh it. So I got this v1 calculate taxable income function, and it is successful. So when I click on it, I got the longer. So this is my span duration. And when I click on this, everything looks similar. There is nothing new. We have already covered that. And if I go to the span event, there is no event and there is no logs. Now let's quickly go back to our worksheet and make some minor changes. So here I added two additional lines which calls telemetry.add event function. Here I just added a text called empty event, and I added another event which is called event with attributes. And as a part of this function, I am allowed to add a JSON style or a key value pair style text. And if you look, I have added this employee salary as a total employee, which is part of this, okay, and so on. Now let me recreate this. So this got created. Since it recreated, I need to make sure that the trace level, log levels are set. And now let's call this function. So I should get my fifth entry here. So this appeared, and let me click on that. So this screen looks exactly same, no change. If I click on span events, since I added two event and two events are added at a different point, so these events are coming in a two different color. So it says that this first event was added at this date or at this time. Likewise, events with attributes were added here, and then these are the different attribute. So whenever you are writing a complex logic or a transformation implementation in your program through a stored procedure or a UDF, you can always add this event, and this event will tell you what was a value when the logic was running and being applied. Okay, this function ran successfully, but now let's do a small simulation where we are trying to access a variable which is not yet defined. This percentage variable is defined in the line number 78, but it is being referred here. And obviously, when I try to execute this function, it will fail. But let's say when it fails, and if my race is enabled and log is enabled, how does it capture the detail in event tables? So recreated this function and enabling the trace levels. So trace and log, both levels are enabled. And let me change these values for now. Let's run this. So here it clearly says that this has failed on line number 16, and it is telling why it has failed because this unbound local variable. So local variable is not accessible. Reference before assignment. Okay, makes sense. So I will have a failure entry here, and these are the only two times I called. So let's see what happens next. Now this trace appeared here, and when I click on it, click on this span, and if I go to the span event, so the first event is captured, second event is captured, and my third event says the local variable tax rebate code percentage refers before this, and this is a line number. Okay, so if any changes are happening in your code or because of the data runtime exception coming through this trace level, you would be able to come and see at what point your code has failed. This is the beauty of this trace. So in the log, it says it is a fatal error. And this is also captured here because we have enabled the log. So make sure that whenever you are designing your complex ETL pipeline, which is having a complex Python or SQL code, you can always do this stuff. Now let's simulate another scenario where I am going to create an employee table. When I'm creating this, I'm creating with the system admin role. And here I'm inserting couple of records. And if you look into this record, it is primarily, some of them are invalid, some of them are zero, okay? Some of them are null. And now I am going to, this is my 102. Now, if you look into the line number 141, I am printing employee ID, employee name, total salary, tax rebate code, exemption amount, followed by V1 calculate taxable income. So, and it is taking these three input parameters. Now let's run this and see the result. Recreated that. And when I'm doing it, it is just error. So this time I just change the log level to error. Now calling this SQL statement. Now I will also run for a multiple rows and let's see what happens. Primary reason to run these two scenarios because I would like to see how those traces are captured. So no exception has occurred. But if I run for this employee complete table, let's see what happens. So it got a runtime error, division by zero. So I ran three different scenarios. So I called three more times and let's say I should have a three more entries. So from the last error, I got two success, but one error. And let's first click on this and see how does it look like with a single row. So this is all good. I do not have any specific things. This is my two event. This values are coming, looking good. And this is the log level, which is set to error. So obviously I'm not expecting anything. If I go to the second where I have more than one rows involved, input rows 5 and output rows this. And if I click on this event has come multiple times. Okay. So, so many events are being captured. So you can imagine that if you are really enabling the trace level in your program, it may really fill that event table with a lot of data. So use this feature very cautiously. And I do not have any logs, looks good. So now if I go to this error and let's say I do not know where it had failed, but I just got this trace and I have to go to the span event. And here it has processed my first record. Okay. Then it has processed my this second record, employee salary base. And then finally, somewhere down when I'm processing this record with X code, this is a division by 0 and this particular program failed. So this is a very interesting feature. If your program is failing somewhere because of the incorrect record, this will help you to know which particular record caused a problem while running it, and you don't need to really debug in a very legacy way. I have created another function called V1 calculate tax instead of calculating the taxable salary. And if you it is doing exactly the same thing. The overall logic is same, except this return type, it multiplies the taxable income with rebate code percentage and finally return this value. Let me create this function. And again, I am enabling the trace level equals to always and log level equals to error. I am calling two function where my trace level is enabled. And let's see how the trace event screen looks like. So for this employee 102, I got the result for both the function. Looks good to me. Let's refresh it so and see how this trace name appears when two functions are being invoked. So earlier when we were calling a single function, it was appearing like this. But the moment we called two function as a part of a query, a trace name becomes the query followed by the query ID. If I go to the query history screen where I called this twice, and here also, if I click on the query telemetry, this is how it appears. This is 3 millisecond, this is 3 millisecond. And if I hover on this, span associated with query, span associated with query. So whether I access it from here or whether I go through this query history screen, both looks exactly same. And here I can change type query. So this is how it changes. So let me go back to, and now if I click on this calculate, it will show me everything related to the calculate. And if I click on this here, I do not have any event associated. So this is looking, you have a multiple event associated with that. This is how under one trace it will appear. Okay. Now, if I try to query this particular table, let's see what result does it bring. So let me change my, and I will search for calculate tax. So if I see I have only one entry available with calculate tax, and if I take this trace ID and search for only this trace ID, so this is the span and this is the span event. So this is entries are a part single trace, and since I added two events for a first function, I got the single span ID, but for v1 underscore calculate tax function, I have a separate span ID. Now, if you are debugging something, you by looking at a span ID or a trace ID, you would be able to understand how you can build the correlation and finally debug your complex execution. We got a good overview how this trace event works and how you can add empty event, how you can add an event with attributes and multiple functions being called as a part of a single query. How does it work? So the behavior of trace and trace events are exactly same whether it is a function or a stored procedure, but we'll quickly see an example of a stored procedure. How does it look like by taking the similar calculate tax scenario? So this is my V1 underscore SP calculated taxable income. It is taking exactly the three parameters as earlier, and the logic is almost same. I have not made any changes. Let me add the event here. Okay. And I am going to create it using my system admin role. So SP is created successfully. Now I'm making sure the trace level for this SP is altered. So the SQL says altered procedure, the name of the stored procedure, input parameters type, set trace level equals to always. So it got executed, and let me call it. So this is my query, which was the last execution. And now let's run this. So I got the result. Let's reload the page. If I come to my query history screen under my monitor tab, and this is the call of the stored procedure. And if I click on it, it says it is executed. Some of this information may not appear immediately. And here, if I come to the query telemetry, sometime it may take a while. Let me reload it here. This appeared here also. And here it is coming in a blue color. And if I change it, it is still in a blue color. And the only difference I see, this is a procedure instead of a function compared to our previous thing. And here I do not have input row and output row. In a function, it returns one or a multiple rows. Now, if I click on a span event, I added one empty. So this is almost same. And if I click on a log, since log is not enabled, nothing is shown here. However, there is no major difference between functions and stored procedures except few things. Make sure that this package is added in your stored procedure Python program. This is my another worksheet called 02 trace events. I'm trying to add additional events to my function just to see how many record does it create if I add too many of events in my function. So this we have seen in our earlier example. This is empty event. This is the event. And for empty event, the only timestamp is printed. If you pass an event with additional attribute, this will also be captured, and this has to be in a JSON format. So if you look into line number 34, I added what is the tax percentage, and I also added here what is this exemption percentage and final amount. Okay. So let me create this quickly. So this is V2 calculate taxable income. It got created, and I am changing the log level to error and trace level to always. So this got changed, and I am calling the first query where it is only processing one record. So looks good. This is the last timestamp, and I would like to see how many records being produced for one row processing. So the V2 calculated is done, and this is the trace ID, which I can copy it. Now let me execute this telemetry event table. So if you look into this ID, I got total 7 rows. Okay. So more and more event you add and enable the trace event for always or even an on event, it will fill up your event table quite fast. And you can always go to this table. If I go to the account usage and click on views, and here I have event usage history, and I can click on a data preview, and I can see my credit usage and how much it costed me just by enabling the logging and event trace. So next we will see what is the additional attribute you can add to this trace event and where do they appear on trace event screen. So this is my another worksheet called 03 additional attribute. I am creating a function called V3 calculate taxable income, exactly the same thing. And what is happening, I added additional line here which says telemetry, which is my library here, and here I added events. Now I can also add attribute to my span by calling this function called set span attribute, and can give a key and the value it understand automatically, more like a JSON file where you can give a different type like true, to, decimal, and test text. So I'm going to create it, this particular function. I will just enable the events label to always. Now let me call this function through this query. So I got the result. Let me refresh. It should come after V2 as a V3. So now this has appeared. Let me click on this. So under this other record attribute, I got these 4 different keys and having a value like 2.5 to test text. I don't know why this boolean has not appeared, but maybe because it is in a preview version, it might not be appearing here. But we can check from our event table. Whenever you are setting up any kind of span level attribute, this will appear under this section here. All events are added here, but those attributes are added over there. So we also set attributes as a part of event, which will come under this section. But if you set those attributes at span level, this will come under this span information screen. Okay. Now let me copy this trace ID and quickly check why the boolean is not coming. So going back to my screen, I have to go to record attributes and copy this. And here if I see, so when I copy paste in my JSON visualizer, I am able to see this value true. And here also it is coming true, but it is not appearing on my preview version. Maybe it is a bug or in future they will fix it, but this is how it comes. Now let's talk about a custom span. And this is my worksheet called 04 custom span. So this is my V4 calculate taxable income, same function. And what I'm trying to do, if you look into my line number 14, here I have imported another library called trace from OpenTelemetry. And once you add this library, you would be able to create an object called tracer. So this is how you can get the tracer instance. And with this line number 19, which you say tracer start as a current span, and you can add a custom span. So we have seen a global span. Now it is a custom span, and you can add event to the custom. And after that, you have rest of the events as is, right? So let me create this V4 function. So this got created, and only change I have done it compared to the previous code is this line number 14 and this line number 18, 19, 20. Rest everything is exactly same. So enable the trace level. It is done. Now let's execute this function through the query. If I come to this screen, the query got registered. So this is my V4, but OpenTelemetry has not yet come. It may take a while, as we know. So the V4 has appeared. Now, if you look into this screen, here I have this global span, and then I have a custom span. So if I click on that, here it is showing my global span, and all the informations are coming as we have seen earlier. Now, when I click on this local span, the scope is a custom name, and you see there is an event associated. So this is how this particular custom span work. So as per your need, you can create multiple custom span and you can work with it. Now, if I go to this things, here I have a trace ID which ending with 11C6. And if I go to this, here also it ends with 11C6. My span ID is different. Here also my span ID is different. So let me copy this and let's run my select query. Search for this. If you look into this 2 item, I have a different span ID, and this is my global span ID which has more event. This is my start time, and here this is my end time. So if you look into the difference here, it is started 52:49:277. This is also 52:49:277. This also ended okay at the same time. Because it is running so fast, it is difficult. But if you look into that 275, it ends with 277. Okay, so it ran for roughly 2 to 3 milliseconds. And here, if you look into the scope, this is my global scope and this is my custom scope. And here, this is a span event. So you can classify the record type, whether it is an event, and accordingly, it will sit into this span event or a detail screen. And then you can also see span kind, whether it is internal or whether it is a custom, all those things will be available. And there are record attributes. So if you have a record attribute available, it will come under this record attribute with respect to your span or span event. This is generally null and this is reserved for a future use. Likewise, resources as of now will be null. Okay, so if I clear here, so this is also kept for future use. And we know that if you are having a log, then you will see the observed timestamp is also visible. This is another example just for a demonstration purpose. If you're using a Snowpark program, like I have used the Snowpark program to save a lot of time to onboard your JSON and CSV data. And my very popular course is available in Udemy, where you can really learn how to onboard your data at no time and save up to 95% of your time loading the CSV or a JSON data. And if you enable the log for those kind of Snowpark program, this is how it will appear with a lot of span and the custom span. So we have pretty much covered about span, logs, and what we have not seen so far is about related metrics. So next video, talk more about the related metrics and how you can enable this. This will be a short and quick video because this does not have a lot of features. This is my another worksheet called 05 cost. As we have done the cost analysis in our previous video, let's quickly see how much cost we have incurred. So this is my account admin role and I'm in operations telemetry schema. And if I run my show tables command, so it has 93 rows, which I already recorded, and we have 258K bytes. Okay. So let's see how many record we have it with this particular date. So I have quite a lot of entries available here, and this is the credit usage for the given day. If I run the following SQL, which will primarily take all the data from today's run and summarize how much data is ingested and what is the total credit used versus dollar cost, because I'm using enterprise edition, which is roughly $3 per credit. So it says that 115K bytes ingested, which differs from this. I don't know why. Maybe this is ingested and this is the data which is available here. And this is the total credit, which is 0094 credits. And if I multiply $3 per credit, coming close to 3 cents. The cost is pretty nominal. However, if you try to follow this playlist, I will publish another video which will run our ETL pipeline for 24 hours, and we will see how much cost does it incur after running for 24 hours. We have covered a lot, but if you are curious about language support, trace event can be enabled for all the supported languages in Snowflake. And here is an example which demonstrates how you can enable a SQL-based stored procedure where you can trace the event. I already covered all these languages in detail in my previous tutorial, so I won't be repeating them again. In future videos, we will also explore how to enable metrics, which are another key part of this observability features in Snowflake. We will also explore how log, trace, and metrics level can be enabled at various scopes, whether be it account level, database level, schema level, or individual object level, which we have already seen. So we have learned a lot in this quick and short video, and there are a lot more to cover. So continue to watch this space and make sure that you subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video informative. If you learned something new, please give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments section below. I would love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Happy learning and keep growing.